So hello everyone, welcome to my channel Digital Diaries. So today we are discussing on the most prestigious exam AZ-400 Azure DevOps Expert. So we are going to face some real questions that you can get in your examinations. So let's start. So the first question is, you are developing an open source solution that uses a GitHub repository and you create a new public project in Azure DevOps. You plan to use Azure pipelines for continuous build. The solution will use the GitHub checks API. Which authentication type should you use? So first is personal access token, second is SAML, third is GitHub app, fourth is OAuth. So we need to take care of the ask in the question that it is asking for GitHub checks API. So the correct answer will be GitHub app. So from the documentation, it is given that the Azure pipelines GitHub app is the recommended authentication type for CI pipelines. And here we see that the app works with GitHub checks to display, build, test, and code coverage results in GitHub. Now, next question is, you need to recommend project metrics for dashboard in Azure DevOps, and which chart widgets should you recommend for each metric? So we have here three questions and we have to choose from the chart widgets which it belongs to. So first of all, we will move to the answer. The solution will be the elapsed time from the creation of work item to their completion. So here is the chart from which we can see that this is the lead time when a work item gets created and it gets completed. The second thing is the elapsed time to complete work item once they are active is cycle time. So when we see that the item is active, it is in the active state and it goes to completion, it is known as cycle time. So in the remaining work that we have in our sprints is calculated by burn down. And for an extra info, we have velocity. Velocity is the measurement of the amount of work the team completes in a sprint. Now, next question. Third question is, you need to increase the security of your team's development process. Which type of security tool would you recommend for each stage of the development process? So we have three areas here that are asked: pull request, CI, and CD. So, and the tools are also given. So let's check what is the answer. So for the pull request, we will use the static code analysis like Sonar Cloud, etc. In continuous integration, we also use static code analysis tools. And in continuous delivery, we do pen test. So the other option that was there is threat modeling. So threat modeling is done during the design and architecture phase. This is not done in pull request or CI or CD. Fourth question is, you plan to use AKS to host containers deployed from images hosted in a Docker trusted registry, and you need to recommend a solution for provisioning and connecting to AKS. The solution must ensure that the AKS is RBAC, role-based access control enabled, and uses a custom service principal. Which three commands should you recommend be run in sequence? So we have these commands present there, and we have to put these commands here in a sequence in which we will make the solution to work. So let's go to the solution. So first of all, we will run AZ-ADSP create for Arbit. So it creates an application and associated service. Okay. Now we will create an AKS. It creates a new managed Kubernetes cluster, and then we will assign the roles. So create a new role assignment for a user group or service principals. Fifth question. So you need to deploy AKS to host an application. The solution must meet the following requirements. Containers must only be published internally. Okay. And AKS cluster must be able to create and manage containers in Azure. What do you use for each requirement? So first of all, for containers must only be published internally. So we know that we publish something to the registry, right? So we will see further. Now the AKS clusters must be able to create and manage containers in Azure. So they must have the required permissions to create and manage containers in Azure. So let's go to a solution. So first of all, containers must only be published internally. So we will use ACR, Azure Container Registry for this. Now, second one, AKS cluster must be able to create and manage containers. So we are using a service principal. So it is the best way in which we can tell or allow an Kubernetes cluster to create and manage containers in Azure. So the explanation is also given. ACR allows you to store and manage. So ACR is Azure Container Registry. So it allows you to store and manage container images securely within your Azure environment. like in Docker, we have Docker registry. In Azure, we have Azure Container Registry, right? So in now the AKS needs permission to pull images from ACR and create resources like pods. So AKS takes the images that we store in container registry. So it requires permission to do such things, and that's why we allow it using a service principal. Now, the sixth question is your company is creating a suite of three mobile applications. You need to control access to the application builds. The solution must be managed at the organization level, and what would we use? So, they are asking groups to control the build access and the group type. So, which group we will create to control the build access and what will be the group type? So the groups that we use to control the build access is Microsoft Visual Studio app, and the center of distribution, the group type will be shared type. Okay, so Microsoft Visual Studio app, it is a service for building, testing, and distributing mobile and desktop applications. And we are using shared groups so that they can be reused across multiple apps in App Center. So they are useful, for example, for a common set of testers for multiple apps. Next question. You are implementing an Azure DevOps strategy for mobile devices using App Center. You plan to use distribution groups to control access to releases. You need to create the distribution group shown in the following table. Which type of distribution group should you use for each group? So group 1, we have application testers who are invited by email. Group 2, we have early release users who use unauthenticated public links. And group 3, we have application tester for all the apps of your company. Like in the previous question, we have seen when we have multiple testers condition to test multiple apps, we can guess that it will be a shared thing. So let's move to the answer area. We will check for group 1, group 2, and group 3 what are the answers. So group 1, we are using private group. So private group, why we are using for group 1? Because they are invited by email. These are particular users that we invite for a particular testing or something. So this they belongs to the private group. Now group 2 is the public group. Okay, public group, why we are saying it? Because early release users who use unauthenticated public links, it is already present, the answer is already presented in public links. Okay, and the group 3, as we have seen previously, are the shared ones. So below is the explanation for all of these, right? Now, the eighth question. Your company has a project in Azure DevOps. You need to ensure that when there are multiple builds pending deployment, only the most recent build is deployed. What should you use? Deployment queue settings, deployment conditions, release gates, pull request triggers. So, for sure, when we are on the deployment phase, we are not going to use pull triggers, right? So, this is a common sense. Now, three options are remaining. Let's see what is the answer. So answer is deployment queue settings. Queue setting means how many builds are pending in the queue. So we will say that deploy the latest and cancel the others. So when we have, suppose one build is one deployment is going on, and suppose you have five more builds in queue. So what we will say, cancel the four builds and the fifth build should be deployed. So this is how the setting works, deployment queue setting. Okay, so now move to the next question. You plan to use desired state configuration to maintain the configuration state of virtual machines that run Windows Server. You need to perform the following: install Internet Information Services on the virtual machine, update the default homepage of the IIS web server. How would you configure the desired state configuration file? So we need to configure this desired state configuration file. So it is given that it is a web server config. They are installing some modules and a web server, and they are checking for a file index.html. So let's see what is the answer. So answer is we are installing the Windows features and we are looking for a file index.html. Here we see index.html. So we say we are looking for a file index.html. We are installing Windows web server feature web server. So in PowerShell DSC, the window feature resource is used to install or uninstall Windows Server rules and features on a target node. Okay, so let's move to the next question. You have an Azure DevOps project named Project 1 and an Azure subscription named Sub1. Sub1 contains an Azure SQL database named DB1. You need to create a release pipeline that uses the Azure SQL database deployment task to update DB1. Which artifact should you use? So There is backpack file, deckpack file, LDF file, MDF file. So let's see the answer. So the answer is deckpack file. So I've given the explanation of all the four files when we use. So deckpack files are used when we only have to, you can say, take the schema, and the purpose is to deploy or version control our database structure. It can be used in DevOps, CI/CD, schema migration. Backpack files are used when we have to move both the schema and data. So it is mostly used for backup or when we have to export our database for migration. Okay, so it is used with Azure SQL export commands, import commands, or when we want to archive our data. So MDF file, our primary data file, it stores actual data in schema. It is for core storage file for SQL Server database. LDF file is a transaction log file. It logs all the transaction and changes that we do and is used for rollbacks, recovery, and auditing in SQL. So thank you and stay tuned for the next video.